came to our 2014 conclave on political polarization held at Esalen on the Big Sur coast in California. There was about 40 luminaries who were invited to that conference, and Haidt presented his new book at the time, The Righteous Mind. And we were familiar with his theories beforehand. And then we gave him our presentation. He actually held up our paper, one of the early papers from the Institute for Cultural Revolution, called Depolarizing the American Mind. It's published. You can read it on the Developmentalist website magazine. It was kind of a prototype of much of the thinking that we've developed since then. And in his presentation, unbidden, like he never really even met us, we didn't know us, but in his slideshow to the Esalen conference, he held up our paper and said, "This is the most insightful thing I've read on polarization." And we were swooning. "Oh, Jonathan, you're so famous." So he had an affinity for what we were doing. He gave us a blurb for the paper, at least, saying, and it's on our website to this day. So, we like him. I could say that I, applaud his place in the marketplace of ideas. But I think it's, fair to say that we got some insights as to his, intellectual convictions and concerns as we were driving. I think that for purposes of just being honest with this group, one of the things that I observed about Jonathan Haidt is that he's a kind of a world famous intellectual celebrity for a reason. That cultivating his celebrity is something that he works a lot on, and part of that is being very careful, being very political intellectually, right? So he's a staunch atheist, kind of a Steven Pinker style atheist. And he was very concerned that he would not be perceived as endorsing or being associated with anything that the hardcore atheists might consider woo-woo, right? So I've also kind of interpreted his kind of initial enthusiasm for, but failure to really integrate or uptake this idea of developmental levels, because it's not really intellectually respectable within mainstream academia, right? Especially elite academia like New York University, where Haidt teaches. In other words, he has been brave with respect to progressive postmodernism, and as the momentum against it has increased over the last few years, he's become more strident in his condemnations of postmodernism. But he doesn't condemn the elites, who are really, the people who are, the main proponents and champions of this worldview's power. He kind of blames it on students run amok, right? So I'm not saying, I don't blame him for trying to not offend anybody and trying to play the game of, being intellectually respectable. I mean, every public figure has to do that to a degree. But I think that despite the explanatory power of developmental stages, right, postmodernism rejects that idea, right, in favor of value relativism. How can we say that one form of culture is more evolved than another, right? That's a subversive proposition to the progressive postmodern worldview. And so, Haidt is smart enough to see that if he were to adopt that and integrate that into his values theory, then he would be he'd be on the outs in terms of intellectual fashion. And so, I think that the righteous mind, the specific theory that was put out in that book, has just been fairly well refuted, in the sense that many of the values that he assigned to the right have been clearly demonstrated on the left. Since he published that book, group loyalty. I'm not going to get into a full-blown analysis of his value theory, but it's certainly flat and binary. And I therefore think it doesn't transcend the modernist level and is generally nowhere near as explanatorily powerful as integral philosophy.